I taught in a very deprived community. Yeah, like a community that was, some of my kids were in the criminal justice system. They had their own children. It was a challenging school environment. Wonderful kids, but very challenging school environment. Before every day, when the kids arrived, I used to play, I blasted from the classroom, the song, some song by Avicii, some techno house song that I used to blast at 7 a.m. And I used to stand in my room and I used to scream to get myself psyched up for the day. Because if you're not psyched up, the kids come in, they just steamroll you. Any kids, not just those kids, any kids steamroll you. So I used to turn music up, blasting as loud as I could, and just scream at the top of my lungs for 5 minutes. And the kids would walk in 8 a.m.
You have to own the room.
You have to,
especially.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's like
destroy you. They will destroy you.
That's the most dangerous
Yeah.
phase. I remember when I was in high school, exactly like what you described. Different culture, complete different context. But the teachers it's literally constant battle.
Yeah, you're constantly, it's hardcore, man.
I think it's a harder job than politicians.
I remember in my 5th period class, there was a girl who sat in the front left, lovely girl, she was pregnant. And she was dating a boy who sat in the back left of the class, but he was not the one who had got her pregnant. It was a different boy on the right side of the class. It was so such a message.
But what happened?
You just try and moderate it. Everyone knew. It was just like,
but you have to moderate.
Yeah, you moderate it. Assert dominance. It's just like,
it's so hard.
They're such good kids though.
Yeah, they're so hard. It's such a hard job.
Yeah, it's a hard job. Anyway,
how do you get into healthcare? Like, that's the furthest.
I left the US to join a school overseas, and I taught there, and they wanted me to focus on their entrepreneurial, they called it entrepreneurial leadership program. It's basically, how do you help children develop entrepreneurial skills, mindsets, not hard skills, more mindsets. And the person who had set up that school was himself an entrepreneur, and he actually had just launched, prior to my arrival, a very small venture fund, which was trying to basically be, this 2013, which was basically trying to be Y Combinator for Africa. It didn't go on to be successful, but I joined the fund as a generalist employee. And I ended up working very closely with a few of their portfolio companies, 2 of which were in healthcare. One of them was a medical device financing business, one of which was a healthcare telecoms communication infrastructure for West Africa, based out of Cameroon. And I thought it was super interesting. So I actively started looking for other healthcare opportunities, and then ultimately came to do the medical device clinic business here. So it was an interesting journey.
What was the transition feel like from being a high school teacher managing a whole class of very difficult characters to running a posh private clinic in central London and later on?
Literally exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same. Because at the end of the day, it's human behavior. It's just human behavior. It's no different than what we're doing right now. It's human behavior. Most people are wired in a certain way. They all vary a little bit, but most people are wired in a certain way. And they require certain, much like having young kids, which obviously I have as well. I have a very good friend who says everyone has they wake up in the morning, they've got 2 very big empty buckets. One bucket needs to be, at the end of the day, a great day, the bucket needs to be filled with love, and the other bucket needs to be filled with autonomy. If you can fill up people's books or buckets with love and autonomy within a very clear structure of things that are acceptable and are not acceptable, then the right kind of people, which is not necessarily intelligent, good actors will thrive because they will appreciate that. Bad actors will take advantage of the system, but you have to get rid of the bad actors. But good actors will see an environment that is full of love and autonomy, and they'll say, oh, this is a place where I feel supported and a place where I can learn and grow and take responsibility for the things that I'm doing, provided that you can show people respect, obviously, and help to create and nurture a space that is safe for different kinds of people. So I think being a classroom teacher, running a clinic and having clinic staff, it's actually the same thing, right? People just need to have the support and the autonomy within a sort of an agreed framework for what is or is not acceptable. Very similar.
What's the most difficult thing to do that's underlining the difference between high school? Because obviously I'm super interested in the high school backdrop, simply because I would imagine it's a way worse problem to have.
Yeah.
Because of how difficult it is. Yeah. Because they kids aren't rational,
No,
on 12 senses, you know?
Yeah, so my high school math teacher, who I stayed close with even now, so it's been however many years since I've been in high school, so I'm still in touch with him. He's an unofficial grandfather figure. And he wrote me a card when I went in to teach high school math, because I largely went in because he was profoundly impactful in my life, that I felt compelled to explore that as a career option. And he wrote me a card and he said, the number one mistakes that new teachers make is assuming that an 18-year-old has the emotional and intellectual resilience of an adult. That is the fun. So like, you think you're talking, it's not because 18-year-olds are not capable. They're extraordinarily capable, 17-year-olds, but they are biologically, physiologically, emotionally not outside of their prime adolescent development window. Necessarily, you have a cognitive and emotional baseline, which is just different. It's not what you'd expect of an adult. But many adults never actually grow out of that. But at that age, the neurological, physiological development, like biology has a different plan for you than when you're 25. So I think it's just like you're dealing with an exotic asset class in a way that you're not when you're dealing with adults, where you can have, like, for many adults, a reasonable conversation where there won't be any emotional triggers in that conversation, which you think you're talking about apples and actually you're talking about grapefruits, and you're like, hold on a minute, I don't understand how we ended up there. So it's very different.
Because they look like adults.
They look like adults. That's the mind fuck.
They give you that illusion that they're an adult.
Exactly.
But
you're grown up. You can shave. You're bigger than I am. But it's a very different...
And they all have a hidden agenda that they either showing or they don't show you, which is trying to prove themselves by proving you are wrong.
I think but that's part of the autonomy bucket, is giving people the space to. Anyway,
very interesting. So, what have you learned in the last couple of weeks?
So we should be very clear that I have client calls starting in 9 minutes.
Oh, that's very good. Do 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. It'll be a quick one, but that's fine.
What have you learned in the last couple of weeks that changed your understanding of the industry that Coherent operates?
So I think in healthcare, I'll go a step back. There's a really interesting announcement out of a health tech company in the US. I won't name the company, but they announced that they are now doing proactive patient engagement. Proactive patient access. I remember looking at this and saying, hold on a minute, that sounds very familiar. Where have we heard those words before? Aside from in here. And this is a big company, right? They have 200 employees. They've raised $100 million. They do SMS, email. It's only in the US, right? So SMS, email, voice, patient handling. But so much of their work is about being reactive, which is exactly how healthcare is baselined. People call in, and so you need to do something. But so often it's the proactive work, patients not necessarily calling in, but you need to go out to them, you need to engage with them, that this idea of outbound is suddenly a thing. Now there's a category emerging of proactive versus reactive healthcare communication and healthcare patient operations. The reality is that all healthcare patient operations is proactive, or should be, 100%. In no case, except maybe when a new inquiry comes in because a patient woke up and there's some problem with the knee or they have pain in the tooth. So at that point, maybe it's reactive because the patient's reaching out to you. But as soon as they've reached out to you, as soon as that moment happens, they are under your care, they're under your supervision, everything from that point forward is on you as the healthcare provider, as the expert, to be proactive in your management of that patient case. I was speaking last week with an operation director at I think it's a 7 or 8 site MS private equity group, acquiring and growing. And we were having this whole conversation about patient operations and reactivation, re-engagement, etc. And we're staring at each other laughing because he kept saying, we're just of the belief that our physical therapists, our practitioners should do it. And I just looked back at him and say, cool. Are they doing it? He says, no. I was like, okay. What are we talking about? Literally, was it? So it's great that you think that's what should happen. It's great that you think your respiratory physician, your gynecologist, your osteopath, it's great that you as a practice owner think that the practitioner should be doing that, but you're wrong. And the way that you know that you're wrong is because they're not doing it. It's not happening. And so I think for me, when I think about the conversations we've had most recently with practice owners, with group leaders, private equity groups that are buying, scaling, acquiring, and also looking at the ecosystem, I think people are coming to terms with the fact that if you want to differentiate, if you want to cut through as a healthcare provider, you need to be on the front foot. You need to be proactive in how you're managing your patients, not reactive to their needs. Proactive to managing your patients does not mean you send out an automated email every 3 months. That's not proactive. Proactive means delivering something that feels like one-to-one patient support to everyone so that every patient feels like the only patient. That's a very different framework for how your healthcare provider operations are set up. Many people think, I'm going to build a call center. I'm going to build a remote call center to handle patient correspondence. That is the wrong framework. But remote call center assumes that they're handling inbound, but most of the patient conversation should actually be outbound. You should be reaching out to patients proactively. How are you feeling? What comes next in your care journey? You should be proactively guiding them through the journey, not waiting for them to say, hold on, I've got a problem. There's a post that I read recently, someone who went through a care journey for themselves. I think it was, I don't know if they were recovering from cancer, they were going through diagnosis, you know what I'm talking about. And he was saying, from the patient perspective, the worst part of the entire healthcare journey is just when you're floating around at home and nobody's looking after you, no one's following up with you, no one's checking in on you. You don't know if what you're doing is right or wrong. You're just there. You've been released.
The orphaned patients.
And the reality is that if you want to tackle orphaned patients, you need to be proactive. You need to be thinking about, how do I constantly engage with, reach out to, support my patients 24/7, 365. This is a fundamentally different model of operating than I want to make sure someone answers the phone when someone calls. These are different problems. One is, I don't have someone to answer the phone. Okay, cool. There are a lot of ways to solve that problem. People have been solving that problem for decades. They've been outsourcing it to remote call centers. They've been hiring people offshore. They've been increasing their staff. That is a different problem than I want to actively support, nurture, and engage 100% of my patients from intake to discharge. These are fundamentally different issues. And I think for us, what's become more and more clear is that the providers that connect with us are the ones who are thinking of patient engagement as infrastructure, the ones who are thinking about patient relationships as infrastructure to their growth, not as a bolt-on, not as a thing that they slap on the end. Oh yeah, I need to make sure I send them their goodbye email. That's not the right provider for us. I'm speaking to a clinic owner up in Edinburgh who runs a practitioner-led group. They're growing quite quickly, a lot of recurring, integrated, membership-based healthcare programs. And we've been going back and forth, and he said, I've been in practice now for 30 years. I still have not figured out how to deliver patient journey nirvana. 30 years, a long time. I said, where does it break down? He said, when I only have my patients, I can manage it because I know where they are, and I think about them, and I can deliver that one-to-oneness because I give them my WhatsApp number and they reach out to me. And so constantly I'm engaging with patients. But when I start having a second practitioner, a third practitioner, a fourth practitioner, it's a business. And as soon as it becomes a business, you have a problem. And as soon as you have a problem, you need to either say, okay, I'm going to actively invest in solving this, or I'm just going to throw duct tape at it. Hire another part-time receptionist, hire a booking coordinator, that person will have the same constraints as you as the business owner. There's no number of people, there's no headcount that you can add to your business to suddenly allow you to support millions of patients. And so when we think about the value that we're trying to deliver to a practice, it's very clear. Number one, appointment uplift. Yes, there is a appointment book density opportunity for you. Usually it's between 10 and 15% of your total appointments completed in a month. So you can lift value by 10 to 15% in your practice, spend zero on new marketing, spend zero on new headcount just by working with us. So there's this huge value driver around appointment book density, appointment book uplift. But the other one is around workforce transformation. You have a client care team of 12 or 25 or 50. Why not cut it in half? And that's not intentionally making everyone redundant. That's just saying, hold on a minute, I can deliver the same, if not better quality of care to a much larger number of patients with a fraction of the headcount. Because most of that headcount is there as redundancy layer if someone's not there, if they go away on holiday, if they go off on paternity or maternity leave, if they have a bad day, if someone churns and there's staff turnover and they leave. All of those issues are baked into your headcount model, and that is what's creating fat. So now you have an augmentation, an amplification, the ability to support all of these patients without necessarily scaling your team. That's the other big driver of value for us, is how can we actually take headcount cost out and maintain, if not lift, the quality of the patient experience. If I can be controversial for a minute. I think if you are a healthcare leader and you are sticking your heels into the ground, committed to the old ways, I don't think you can be a forward-looking healthcare leader and have your head in the sand about what is happening right now from a technology perspective. What is happening? A couple of weeks ago, we had, I think it was Shime on the podcast, she was talking with us. She was saying, as a clinic entrepreneur, she started and sold her practice, private GP, the amount that has changed from when she first qualified to date, from a technology perspective, is dramatic. Not only are the basic systems that are being used to capture appointments, medical notes, etc., changing, but now you can record patient conversations, scribe notes, automatically collect payment, et cetera, et cetera. Technology is hitting every part of the practitioner and healthcare provision assembly line. Every part is subject to change. And I think that right now, when we speak with group leaders, when we speak with healthcare providers that are thinking about the future of delivering value-based care, they are thinking very rigorously about not the state of play, but what are the assumptions underneath it? How did we get here? Because oftentimes the answer to how we got here makes no sense at all. It's, we had this system, but it broke down in these 2 or 3 places. So we needed to add a few people to account for that breakdown. And then we had to get a new system, which doesn't really make sense in the context of our old system, but we had to do it anyway. Then we layer on a few more people, and that process repeats itself. So you end up with these fragmented Frankenstein-looking team tech combinations that don't make sense together. You've got a front office team of 50 who are handling patient operations across a small-scale private hospital, but you also have a CRM that can't track the source of the lead. So you've made the wrong decisions. These bad decisions compound, not because you've done something, you've made a technically wrong decision, because at the time when you made a decision about a certain software or about a certain capability, you had limited information. And so you inherit these layers upon layers of incremental improvement. And really what you need is a wholesale change. There's this great quote from a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who says, when things aren't working, it's very rarely a 20% change. It's usually a 200% change. You have to think about that as a healthcare leader. When things are not working, it's not a 20% change. It's a 200% change. Very few healthcare providers are willing to go through that change. The stakes are high. You're in patient-facing interactions, you're in private sensitive data. Getting it wrong is bad. It's very different than selling in a challenger CRM to a B2B software company, where, quite frankly, if they move from HubSpot to your thing, like, it only gets so bad. It's time, it's a bit of waste. Hopefully it gets to a better place, but the how bad can it get is not that bad. In healthcare, the answer is very bad, but you have to be willing to take that risk. You have to be willing to say, I need to wholesale change the way that a part of my business is working. And if you're not willing to do that, you will live in incremental improvement as a healthcare provider. And I think that when we engage with groups that are excited about change, they are thinking wholesale. They're coming to us and they're saying, I want to reduce my front office headcount by 50%. I want to cut out 3 layers of bloat software, and I want to lift conversion and retention in my patient body. That's a wholesale change. That's not a small part. That's not trade this WhatsApp messaging tool for that email messaging tool. It's systematic, it's systemic, it's entrenched in the way that they work. It's a fundamental rewiring of a lot of their workflows, particularly around the administration and service of the patient body. Now, fortunately, we don't live in the clinical layer. So if you're sitting there with your head in the sand, at least pay attention to diagnostic improvements, at least pay attention to medical devices and technology that enable you to provide better actual healthcare. That is we had Krista on, a neurologist at Cleveland Clinic a few weeks ago. At the end of the day, the core business is providing great healthcare, but a huge part of that is providing great patient experience, great patient service. If you want to unlock genuine change, thinking that this is a take out a tiny screw here and replace it with a new screw there, it doesn't move the needle.
You just had a client call 2 minutes ago.
Literally 2 minutes ago.
What was, obviously you don't have to share details, of course, but what was the problem and what was the things that they got stuck on?
So I just spoke to a clinic. It's a clinic owner and her business manager, and they're a fast-growing medical aesthetics dermatology practice, and they're changing practice management software. And so they're talking to us about what parts of the patient journey are you going to own in-house? Can you own in-house? What are the limitations of the practice management software? And how big is your team? And so they're growing quite quickly, and they're now thinking about adding in headcount. Oh, we need more people to support patients. And so I said,
you buy more software to hire more people to use
software, to get more people to use more software. The software companies have a great time. Like, it's a field day, right?
The definition of bloat.
More seats, yeah. It's the software company is making its money every time you add a person. So they want the feature complexity to be there because you need to add more seats, keep buying more seats, keep coming back up to the buffet. So I'm speaking to them and saying, we're really interested to understand, why are you hiring another patient coordinator? They say, oh, we need someone to answer the phone and follow up with them. I said, why does that have to be a person that you retain on your staff? Oh, we don't know. How else would you do it? I was like, how about this way? And the crazy thing is that this way, with lots of evidence, is better, cheaper, faster, and not made up on the fly. It's actually something that has been thought about, built, proven, made stronger, reinforceable, but there's still a block intellectually. It's a redesign. It's a and actually, someone said on the phone call, on the call just now, well, that seems like a lot of information to take in. That's a lot to take in. It's a lot to think about. And it is a lot to think about. But this is, sorry, this is buzzing. Right? I need to get on with the client. But what Anthropic and OpenAI just collectively announced $15 billion joint ventures with services-based businesses to go embed technology into mid-market private equity-owned organizations because there's such an opportunity to replumb from the inside. That is a top-down P&L profit-driven mandate from the owners of said businesses. Understandably, if you're in healthcare, this thing is coming. It's coming. The question is like, what side of the knife do you want to be on? And the idea that it's too much information to hold, that's just not acceptable. You can't claim to deliver frontline leading patient experience while also expecting a patient to await snail mail to have their clinical follow-up. No dice.
But what do you say to those? You had so many calls, literally every call that you were on, somebody would say, the owner or the leader would say, oh, we've tested for the last whatever month, we've been testing AI receptionist or whatever. What do you say to them?
When people say, oh, we tried an AI receptionist, I always say, cool, how many people did you reduce your headcount by? You used AI receptionist. They told you, we're going to drive more lead volume. You can let someone go. How many people actually met that criteria? How many clinics were able to genuinely downsize their front office team with an AI receptionist? I am yet to meet one. I'd love to meet one. I often ask, does anyone know anyone who's over a period of more than 6 months reduced their headcount? The answer is no one. Now, will they at some point when the technology gets there? Very possibly. Or it might always be the case that there is a risk or a verification tax on the clinic if you're using an AI pure play receptionist. And so someone has to do the checking. But that checking job is not a full-time person in the way that people have thought about it previously. It's not someone that you retain on full-time salary that sits there and does all the work. It's someone who's specifically looking at where things may or may not fall outside the remit of this dedicated technology. And so you have this weird trade-off that clinics are trying to make of, oh, do I buy more tech or do I get more people? And the answer is neither. That's a huge mindset shift. I'm going to do less software and less people and get better outcomes. Those two, if 1 + 1 = tomato, it doesn't make sense. And so there's a lot of intellectual burden and it's hard right now. We hear from practice owners all the time. I'm overwhelmed with different things that are trying to make my business more efficient. I am overwhelmed. And it's like it's a red flag. It says, wow, there's a lot of noise. There are a lot of people who are trying to make things more efficient. But as a clinic owner, your job, I used to say to my team when I was running clinic, my job is to procure solutions to make us move faster. It's not to our core business is delivering patient care when they're in the room. That is our core business. We are a restaurant. Our core business is ship the food. But we need to make sure that we're bringing in the best from everywhere else to design the experience. I don't also build the oven. If I'm running a restaurant, I go out, I buy in the equipment to cook the food, just like you buy in medical devices. But patient operations is a medical device. You need to buy it in. You need to have the expertise, not necessarily homegrown in-house because you want your therapist to do it. Buy the system that works. Several decades of absolutely monster fintech businesses come out of the US, UK, globally. In Europe, UK, you've got Wise, you've got Revolut, you could call Monzo, it's slightly more regional, but again, a monster player. There are a lot of iconic fintech brands that have been built in the last 2 decades, and they're absolutely wiping the floor with incumbents.
Why?
The entire DNA of the way those businesses are built are reoriented around the customer, the end user of the product. Everything that has been built is in service of the end customer. You can go back to that recycled video of Jeff Bezos in whatever 1995 where he's talking about the only thing that matters is what customers want. And people are saying, don't you think it's crazy that you're taking out all this warehouse space? And he said, no, because we want to be close to our customers and that's what they want. They want speed and that's the thing that matters. And I think similarly, Revolut and players of that scale and quality have prioritized the end customer experience above all else. Look at TransferWise, now Wise, their hallmark product was you can move money across borders in 3 clicks. And before that, it took bank mandates and hours, if not days, and cost you 5 times as much. So they were the process of unbundling and rebundling. Revolut is a phenomenal example of a business that has unbundled a specific area of financial services and is now rebundling
everything imaginable, phone plans, financing, and all the things that come with it. You haven't seen a healthcare player that has achieved that kind of dominance in market. Arguably, Epic from the US, big hospital system, granted bootstrap, totally different kind of company, but they have a sense of almost like monopolistic behavior in industry. But you don't get that very often. And the question is, of course, why, or what market dynamics need to change that allow for the same kind of rise, and hopefully not fall, but rise of healthcare players. You see some of that in the consumer space. So you see wearable companies that go zero to hero. You have the Auras, the Whoops, now the Googles of everyone, that is an established domain. There's a lot of, I think, hypothesis, zeitgeist right now, that the rest of healthcare is starting to have its why now moment, because you can suddenly break free of some of the enterprise lock-ins that have historically prevented third-party applications from innovating in a particular domain. And the reference point, I think, for us from a healthcare perspective is if you look at Wise or a Revolut or a fintech player, they took a very specific thing that the incumbency, big banks, were really at. They did not do a good job at serving the end customer in that thing. And we're seeing the same thing right now in healthcare communications and patient support. These practice management software and EMR, EHR are really good at being a medical record source of truth. They're really good, I'll put it in quotes, but they're good at serving that core purpose. But as soon as you start going into patient operations, patient support, CRME activity, they fall down. And the number of conversations that I have personally had with practices that are using this PMS or that PMS or this EMR or this EHR, but are failing to deliver on the patient experience that they want to because of the limitations of the technology, that list just gets longer and longer. And so I think the thing you have to believe is that you can build a category winner in this extension space of patient operations that sits outside of the core equivalent of banking infrastructure. And like time will tell if that's the case.
Earlier, we were talking about different kind of operators that have different kind of tolerance in terms of risk and investment and expectation of the new AI, whatever, right? We were literally talking about AI receptionists, and a lot of operators or healthcare leaders wanted to adopt AI, but they are drowning in choices and noises of different AI options. And a very noticeable one was AI receptionist. Literally every startup or small or large organizations are in healthcare rolling out some version of AI receptionist. To those who are evaluating hundreds of providers, especially on the point of procurement, those healthcare leaders, clinic group leaders, what do you say to them? What's your advice to them? What risk to take? What action to take so that to not reducing the risk of taking on the wrong thing? You talked about this many times, where every week you have call with somebody's prospect leads, customers. They've most of them got burned was the word that they used very often by an AI tool, AI receptionist.
Look, there's nothing wrong with AI receptionists, but what you get and what is being sold are different things. What you get is calls being answered more often than they may otherwise, occasional completion on a workflow, the likely need for your team to check and verify, and more likely than not, inconsistent handling of edge cases. So it's called AI receptionist because it's an alternative or an augmentation to the receptionist, but really what it is, out of hours answering, or if your front desk is not available, some kind of triaging step that happened beforehand.
The passive acceptance of, but you talked about this quite a bit earlier, but what is your one piece of advice to people who want to take a better option to procure better?
I think what you need to believe is that in the market for front office transformation, you need to be thinking about something that will direct itself, that will proactively do the work of the front office, not reactively do the work of the front office faster. So if you deploy an AI receptionist into your practice, you have a tool that will allow you to receive things and handle them in a slightly more efficient way. That is not the fundamental problem of the front office. The front office might be capacity constrained, but the reason that they're capacity constrained is because they're always on the back foot. There's always this, more stuff is coming in, more stuff is coming in. There's no proactive management. So what you want is a system, a platform, a team that are able to drive proactively towards outcomes. I was speaking to a practice owner today who has an offshore front office team. full-time employees to reception equivalent. And I said, oh, well, why are you looking to change? And he said, they answer the calls as they come in, but they don't really follow anyone up. And he attempted to implement an AI receptionist. And it turns out the AI receptionist did exactly what his front office team were doing right now, which is answering the calls and not really following up, because the AI receptionist is trained on the thing that you're already doing.
Passive.
It's passive. It's very passive. So if you want to approach the front office problem in a let's do passive but faster, no problem. There are solutions in market, but if you want to change the playbook and you want to be proactive in managing patients, that's a different expectation of a product or a service that you're buying. And when we speak to practices, we often say, tell us who's off track right now. How many patients that should have a next appointment don't? If you can't answer that question with a number in real time, you're on the back foot. The answer is not, oh, it's 40 a month. The answer is 467 last month. 467 patients are off track. They don't have an next appointment and they should. That's a number. If you know that number, then you know what the problem is. Then you have to think about how you solve it. But if you don't know what that number is, then you're staring into blank space. We speak to providers all the time who say, oh, I know patient retention is important. The number of people, business gurus, say patient retention is important, but they don't tell you anything about what that actually means. Who are you trying to retain? Not the patients you successfully discharge. You don't need to retain them. How about your cancellations and no rebooking? Okay, everyone knows it's important. How many of your cancellations last month didn't rebook? As of today, don't have an next appointment if they canceled last month. Do you know the number? It's a number. There's no subjectivity in it. The number is 47. Okay, great. So you've got 47 problems. Let's assume that you can recover half of those appointments. So now you have 25 appointments that are recoverable in the course of a cancellation, no rebooking. It's a known number. If you don't know those numbers, you can't have a strong buying decision. You can't go into a procurement cycle exploring, I wonder what problem I'm going to solve because I need to buy AI. And this is often the problem that we see in our conversations with providers. They want to bring on technology to make things more efficient, but they don't have a clear sense of what problem they're solving. So we worked with a small-scale private hospital that had a data quality issue. They didn't know who was where in the journey, who they could or couldn't contact. And then they came to us to support with their lead conversion and patient retention, but their leads quality was also in the floor. So they didn't actually have a problem that we could solve. And we went through this exercise together, and the changes that need to happen are foundational at the provider. It has nothing to do with a third party. It's not an AI solution or a service provider that fixes that. You have an internal issue. Your plumbing is broken. You don't have the right data. You don't have the right PMS hygiene. You can't really make the thing move faster if the fundamentals are not there. And we see this all the time with providers who are trying to buy in automation or buy in AI, but don't know what problem they're solving. And so you ultimately buy something, but you're not happy with the outcomes. And so you get burned because you go in thinking, oh, it's going to make my front office 10 times more efficient and I won't need to hire anyone. And all the AI answering agent is going to do is pick up the phone. These are different problems. So you need to have that scope of problem. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? It needs to be crystal clear. This is an absolute must.
And that sounds like a much bigger problem for larger healthcare organizations, right? The larger it gets, the more complex, the more
100%.
Bureaucratic and
100%.
problematic it is.
If you're a fast-growing group, you're a hospital, you're a private hospital network, every time you add on more beds, more patients, more practices, more practice managers, at every time an email gets sent with a list of patients, a list of names that need a certain thing, every time that step occurs, the problem gets worse. And so if you're a 25-site group or you're a small-scale private hospital and you can't measure what's happening in your own house, there's very little that you can do. You can shove AI into that problem all you want. There is a fundamental issue in certainty and clarity that you can't overcome. And so oftentimes the thing that we say to providers is, cool, let's start with an audit. Just share, let's look at some data together. How many of your patients qualify for X? Oh, wow, I didn't know it was. We have this thing called first visit integrity. What's your first visit integrity? What is a first visit integrity? You have a certain number of new starters every month. This is what you're paying all that marketing money to, new starters. How many of them don't show up? And how many of them only show up once? So let's say you have 100 new starters. If 10 of them don't show up and 10 of them only show up once, actually, you've got 80 new starters. And those 20 are actually the most expensive part of your marketing funnel because you spent all this money and time and practitioner resource to get them in the door and in the room, and they either didn't show up, in which case they blocked the calendar and created inefficiency, or they only showed up once. And if they only showed up once, the same loss occurs. So you're tracking to this number of 100, your marketing agency's having a field day, you think everything's going really well, but actually you've got a big hole in your first visit integrity. You don't know that problem exists until you look at the numbers. And when we show those numbers back to providers, they, well, hold on a minute. Everything we've assumed about our marketing funnel, about our cost of acquisition, about our CAC, about our LTV, it's all wrong. It's taken with the wrong numbers. And actually we're 10% unoptimized or under-optimized at both sides of the funnel.
You just said the step one of this playbook. So let's say there are 3 or 4 or 5 steps. What is the playbook? What is the framework, the step-by-step framework? The first step is
data quality.
Data quality, measurement.
Data quality, foundational. So if in your PM, well, we're not talking about making it scientific. Healthcare operations is messy. You're always going to have 20% inaccuracy, overflow, mistakes, inevitable, duplicate patient entries, parent and child relationships with the same email. There's always going to be some issue. That's fine. That's edge case. The core bulk of the patient book needs data foundations. Basically, who is it? When do they come in? What do they come in for? If you know those 3 things, you're ready to start thinking about audit. You're ready to start thinking about analysis. Okay, so now I can see who has come in, when they came in, and what they came in for. And I can start to make this sort of puzzle come together. So you have this data foundation. Then you have audit. And once you're sitting in audit, you've got almost like the magnifying glass. You're looking deep under the skin to try and understand what's happening at different points of the journey. And that's where the insights, that's where the opportunities start to surface. That's where the problems start to surface. You start to see, ooh, hold on a minute. My patient book is not mixed correctly. In a given month, I have 20% new starters, 80% returning patients, and I'm an MSK provider. That's actually not the right mix. You should be looking at something closer to 88 or 90% returning patients, 10 to 12% new, at least based on the standard that we see in market. So what is that benchmarking? And that's a third level. So you have your data foundations, you've got audit, then you have benchmarking. How does this make sense in the context of where we should be? Where am I? The practice owner that we're speaking to right now, who we're looking at this audit together, and we shared back some data saying, hey, you have about 78% returning patients, 22% new. And he said, okay, great. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that right? Is that wrong? The response, well, I don't know. What's going on in your clinic? Are you actively trying to discharge patients? Are you consciously taking in new leads? So you need to put context against that intelligence, against that data. So that's the third step. And then it's about tackling it, right? So how do we get from this is the benchmark, this is where I am. What steps do I need to take incrementally? What things should I get rid of along the way? What things should I add in? You can go out and buy an AI receptionist all day long. That is a different problem to let me move from foundation to proactive patient management. It is not going to go on that journey with you. If you're looking for a transformation partner, that's a different buy. It's a different procurement strategy. You don't show up to a transformation partner call, expect to have a 30-minute conversation and say, okay, let's give it a shot. You need to come in thinking, okay, I'm ready to fundamentally change the way the business is operating. And I'm going to go from current state to a new future. And we're going to go on that journey together. These are different pathways to procurement.
It sounds like the headspace that clinic operators or leaders buying in the concept of AI, fill in the blank, AI receptionist, whatever, was, oh, FOMO. I don't want to miss out on the AI thing. But more importantly, it's a feature that I can add on top of whatever good, bad, low efficiency stack that I have, operation that I have.
100%.
But what you're describing is an outcome-driven sort of process that meets 3 expectations or goals: revenue uplift, cost reduction, and potentially workforce redesign or transformation or restructure. Can you elaborate slightly more on that?
Yeah, so I think for many healthcare providers, big and small, they have a set of assumptions. Those assumptions are, I have a patient flow of X, I've got 1 million patients under my management. I need a staff size of X. And right now, what I think providers are doing are saying, oh, if I introduce technology, I can make the staff size Y. But this is it's like looking at the problem in a vacuum, saying, if I just tweak this one thing, that will get a bit better. But actually, these things should work together. So if you think about transforming that patient flow, there are 3 parts of that. The first one is my appointment book, my calendar, is that optimized? Do I have minimum white space? Am I creating density? We have this idea of hardening. We use the term book hardening. How do we make the patient book more resilient? How do we keep the patients engaged and supporting them on the month-to-month activity in the provider operation? So book hardening is one of the sort of things you need to be looking for, not just more calls answered. More calls answered is an input to book hardening, patient book hardening, appointment book hardening. This is the outcome. So if your AI receptionist, using AI receptionist as an example, is answering lots of phone calls, that is not an outcome that you necessarily need to be tracking. It's not a valuable outcome. The valuable outcome is the book strength. Is the appointment book reinforcing? Is it getting harder? Is it compounding? That's one level. One level down is, what is the experience of the patients? So you've got appointment uplift or revenue uplift, but you've also got this idea of patient experience maintenance. So if you're a provider that takes great care to support your patients to a high standard, have you suddenly let those standards go because you've introduced technology or automation? The answer, of course, can't be yes, because healthcare is increasingly competitive and you need a certain quality standard in your patient support layer that makes sure people enjoy their time with you and that they feel supported end to end. And then the third layer down from that is workforce transformation. So not just, oh, if I put this thing in, I can take 3 people out, but it's if I put this thing in, I can take 3 people out and I can improve my patient support and I can create appointment uplift and a harder appointment book. Those 3 things should work together. So when you're going in thinking, okay, I'm going to buy a solution, I'm going to turn on the AI receptionist in my practice management software. If you can't do that and achieve certainty across patient support, appointment book density and hardening, and workforce transformation, then you're buying a Band-Aid, a point fix. You're not buying a transformation, a change in the way that the practice is behaving and operating today. When you're a healthcare provider and you have decades of experience, you are accustomed to trying to make things 10% better. And so you reinforce certain behaviors. You want to make your client care team 10% better. So you train them differently, or you give them a new tool. You are in a healthcare provider, you have a certain way of taking payment along the patient journey. And so you make this tweak, you offer this kind of payment method, you introduce Apple Pay and Google Pay, and it blows everyone's mind. You don't send people snail mail, you send emails. This incrementality makes things 5% better, 10% better. But incrementality is not appropriate right now. Right now, you need to be thinking about wholesale change. You need to be thinking about what was previously not possible and is today uniquely possible because of the technological moment that is in front of us. And that is a different wiring, and it's scary. As a healthcare provider, as a healthcare executive, a healthcare leader, you're looking at the market, and having been a buyer in healthcare before, there's paralysis. Which of these things is actually going to help? And it's hard to answer that question if you actually don't know what is the thing you're trying to solve. And that knowledge, that understanding of this is root cause problem 1, is where that transformation journey really starts. And so I think what we see is, can you go through a process of discovery before you go through a process of problem solving? And that's where people usually take the shortcut, and that's what ends up getting you burned.